I'm Susan Crabtree, a national political correspondent for RealClearPolitics, and you're watching The Rebound with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to The Rebound with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to The Rebound. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this show, we explore remarkable rebound stories of resilience and recovery. We highlight the leadership qualities that emerge in the face of life's toughest challenges, revealing the strength and determination within individuals that inspire us all. With me today is someone who has spent more than 25 years on the front lines of accountability journalism as a White House and Congressional correspondent. Susan Crabtree is a political correspondent for RealClearPolitics who frequently breaks important and revealing stories about corruption and cover-ups. She has been covering the Secret Service for more than 16 years. Susan is a former White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner and is a frequent guest on Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. Susan, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Of course, you've done some extensive coverage on Trump's assassination attempt. What's the thing that surprised you the most about the Secret Service coverage and security detail for that event?
Well, like everybody, I was very concerned about not having anybody on that roof and the various, strange and twisted sort of interpretations of why nobody was on that roof. Also, what's in the last few weeks, what's really hit me is the siloing of the communication between the local law enforcement, who are very big partners with the Secret Service that they rely on because they know the place itself. And they don't have enough people to go around, and they really desperately need local law enforcement. But were siloed that day, and the communications breakdown between the Secret Service and local law enforcement was just appalling that day. And we're now learning that the command center wasn't even joint. The Secret Service has a command center, and there's supposed to be local counterparts in there so that they can't be on the same radio frequencies. I've heard that that's technically right. You can't do that, but they were supposed to be able to have interoperability as the directors have testified over the last month, but they didn't, because there was only one of the state local law enforcement, the Pennsylvania state police were in the command center, but nobody else. The butler, the people that were actually trying to follow Thomas Crooks, the shooter, they were not in the command center. So all of that was siloed. It's very disturbing.
I'm literally scratching my head. How the heck does this happen at the highest level in our country?
I have been sort of shouting from the mountaintops for years that the Secret Service they've had a cultural problem. They have a manpower problem. Now, in the most recent iteration of their problems, they have a DEI problem with Director Cheadle pushing DEI hiring to make up for the manpower shortage in some ways. And they have a quality hiring. They have people who would rather go to the Air Marshal Service and other government entities, law enforcement entities under DHS, the Homeland Security Department, because the hours are so long and the stress is so high that people are having trouble staying married in the Secret Service. So there's so many breakdowns, but there's also a leadership aspect to this that is just, we can go into it in depth, but there's always been a CYA culture in the Secret Service. That happened back in 2014 when we saw a lot of fence jumpers and the problems with the prostitution in Colombia. All of that, readers, that Congress thought it was solved. No reforms were really ever instituted.
I love that you bring up cultural issue. I'm an executive coach. My background is in leadership, as a basketball coach, and now as an executive coach. And I talk about every organization is made up of three things: talent, systems, and culture. I call it the organizational triangle. You could have great talent and great systems, but if you have a bad culture, it doesn't matter how good your systems are, how good your talent is. You're telling me now that the talent is subpar. Systems obviously sound broken, but culture is king. If you have a bad culture, nothing else matters. Is this a leadership issue? I mean, the president is the one who picks the director of the Secret Service, no?
Yes, that's a problem too. And you have senators, Senator Grassley and Catherine Cortez Masto, now in a bipartisan way, are calling for the Secret Service now to be a position that Congress has to appoint and confirm. So that would give a little separation from these cozy relationships, and it's just human nature to for a president to get close to the people that he's physically near and are relying on to protect him and his family for years. So that's only natural. That's how Kimberly Cheadle, the Secret Service director, before who actually resigned under bipartisan pressure and outrage after her terrible performance about 3 weeks ago now in the Congressional House Oversight Committee, and she resigned. But yes, it's definitely something that the Congress should have continued to hold their feet to the fire. There was a blue ribbon commission in 2014 that was convened of outside experts on law enforcement and national security, and they issued recommendations. Look, a 300-word report. The number one recommendation was to have somebody from the outside running the organization, not from within the ranks, because there was this cultural problem and there was there's some toxicity within the leadership ranks, and what used to be called an old boys culture now, it's not just that. It's about trying to mete out discipline in an even-handed way, and that's not what happens at the Secret Service. It's all about who you know and how you're connected, and retaliation occurs on a regular basis.
I talk about meritocracy a lot. Again, going back to my days playing basketball in the parks at Long Island. If it didn't matter if you were tall, short, old, young, black or white, if you could help the team win, you got picked to play. And now we're talking about DEI. We're talking about old boys club. We're talking about performance to protect. I mean, the former president, Donald Trump, who is running for president of the United States, number 47, almost gets killed. And we have glossed that over like it's like, oh, that's last week's news. Like that's not that big of a deal anymore. It gets brushed under the carpet. How does that happen you're a member of the media. How is that not made a bigger deal and continue to be made a big deal today?
Well, I think you had the switcheroo basically happen. You had the Kamala Harris campaign, and then she chose Tim Walz, Minnesota governor, and you had the media, which is mainly left of center, and they all embraced this bizarre situation that happened where no one in the media was giving Kamala Harris the time of day, especially in the White House press corps. Her poll numbers were the worst of any vice president in history just a few months ago, if they aren't still. And all of a sudden, there's a coronation and she's the second coming, and that has taken center stage in all of the media priorities and has pushed this assassination attempt that has everything to do with our continuity of government and our ability to participate in democracy. It's at the heart of our democracy itself, this idea that you could go to a rally and not fear for your life, participate in the political process. That should be foremost in every media news outlet's priorities and placement of stories. And I am lucky that RealClearPolitics has allowed me to continue on this beat, and they want me to stay on it. And it's really bizarre when you have, people who have never covered the Secret Service, they haven't made that a priority in their beat selection either, interviewing the director and they're not asking the right questions, and they're not using the right terminology, and it's by design. It's definitely by design. They don't want to be held accountable, so they give out these TV interviews with ABC News and CBS News with reporters I have never seen on the beat before.
You talked about the media's left of center, and I always wonder why. Like, why is the media left of center? Why aren't there more conservative, right slanting journalist outlets? How can you explain? How's that explained to our listeners, our viewers?
Well, I came out from the West Coast to Washington, D.C. out of college, and I was struck by how left-leaning it was. But at the same time, there was this sort of guise back then. I came in 94. That's when I started in journalism. There was a guise of objectivity. So people, but it was still, you had this sort of Northeast power, that was where the control of the media was, and Hollywood too. And they're really run by left of center people, and they choose left of center reporters. And at that time, there was only a very few conservative media outlets. So in terms of your career, if you cast yourself as a conservative, or if you're following conservative angles, your career opportunities are going to be limited. So it's not, I mean, it's just kind of common sense that you would not go that route, that you would appeal to where the money and the jobs are. And it's still that way. And thank goodness for some more media outlets and the internet that's allowed for smaller publications like mine to be able to cover both sides and cover it in a fair manner, because as we know, these elections are so close in this country. It's really a jump ball. And with in this election, we see in our polls, it's evenly divided. Our country is evenly divided, so our media should reflect that.
Yes. Well, let's go to break. And when we come back, Susan will tell us what drives her to search for the truth and fight for what's right. OMJ Clothing is an elite men's clothing store that provides a vast array of spectacular brands of men's lifestyle apparel for every day. Elevate your business upscale casual at OMJ. Success comes from standing out. The Rebound is sponsored by Sector Spider ETFs, a unique family of exchange-traded funds that divide the S&P 500 into 11 sector index funds. You can buy just the sectors you like, or customize the S&P 500 by weighting the 11 sectors to meet your financial objective. Please visit them on the web at sectorspiders.com. That's sector, SPDRS.com.
Alps Portfolio Solutions Distributor, a registered broker-dealer, is the distributor for the Select Sector Spider Trust.
Susan, tell us what drives you to search for the truth and fight for what's right.
Well, journalism is a calling. It's especially when it comes to print journalism. You're not going to make a ton of money in this business I am better at investigative reporting, and I like the print medium because it's interesting to me to try to solve the puzzle. And I love interacting and building trust with people over time and getting to the heart of the story. Now, this story about the assassination attempt and the problems with the Secret Service, I can't think of a better way, use of my time and my passions it's because I talked about it before, but it's about continuity of government, making sure that we can protect our democracy and our ability to participate in politics, go to rallies, to have our political freedom and to exercise it on a regular basis. And we shouldn't be doing that with fearing for our lives. Corey Comparatori lost his life in front of his family that day. That should never happen. This should never happen.
What is your biggest challenge when you're hunting for the truth? Who blocks you? How do you get round the block? Are you threatened? Are you challenged? Because there's some pretty powerful people out there that don't want you knocking on their door.
Well, I will tell you a little episode that it sort of encapsulates that. I was covering the Secret Service, the assassination attempt. I've been covering the Secret Service for many years, so I have these sources that constantly pop up and tell me when things happen. And after the assassination attempt, I was going to Milwaukee, and I was on the plane, and thank goodness I had good Wi-Fi. They were coming forward out of the woodwork to talk to me and tell me what was going on that day, that there were no drones in the air, even though Thomas Crooks had a drone, the shooter, that there was another event that was allocate the other resources were being allocated to the Jill Biden event. There was competing events, and to look into that. And so I said in there, I used the word diverted. I said, my sources used the word diverted, that some of the resources were diverted from the Trump rally to the Jill Biden event, indoor, 300 people in a casino that night in Pittsburgh. And the next day I woke up, and instead of answering my questions that I sent to the Secret Service in an email, they were he had tweeted to me, to everybody, for all eyes to see, that was very wrong, Susan, and and then taking issue with my story and my tweet, instead of answering my questions like a normal in the normal process, or calling me on the phone.
Right.
And so Fox News was running with that story, and so I just said, okay, here are the questions. That wasn't a way of trying to intimidate me. And I truly did. I have known that the Secret Service is known for obfuscating and lying, and I've had that experience in 2014, where a comms director and the Secret Service director, the first female woman Secret Service director, Julia Pearson, they were fired because they both lied to me, and they lied to President Obama, and they lied to Department of Homeland Security. Jay Johnson was secretary at the time. And that's what they were lying about, an episode that I reported about a man that was not cleared to have a gun that was allowed to be in an elevator with President Obama. So it was a direct threat
Wow.
to President Obama's security. And so they got fired because all of a sudden they were lying, not just to me, to other reporters, but to the president himself. So I know that they have a pattern of this behavior. And I said Anthony Guglielmi, he's the press person. I'm not saying that you're deliberately lying to me, but you better make sure you're in the loop, because I've had a history of the Secret Service communications directors lying to me. And that's just on the Secret Service beat. But, the White House constantly tries to push you around and intimidate you, and you don't get things on a silver platter, as most of the reporters do in the White House press briefing room. If you are from not one of their favorite publications, or if you've given them a hard time. That's why I think that there was so much that the press corps was not being honest about Biden's cognitive decline, because they piece out stories that they leak out through their favorite reporters. And if you were giving them a hard time, you're not going to get the access.
Right. Let's talk more about your profession. We wonder why reporters aren't asking real questions, and we wonder if it's real journalism. You kind of touched on it, but if you could expand a little bit more on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, it is sort of, I call the press briefing room in DC, the White House press briefing room, I call it like a little Snooches on the Beaches. I don't know if you know that reference. It's a Dr. Seuss book, and it's stars upon thars, right? You don't have, some of the Snooches have stars upon thars, and some don't. And, I just would hate for them to all be in a level playing field. That's what, it was funny when Trump plays some favorites he likes the New York Times, but it was much more level playing field when Trump was in office, and they didn't have all of these games that they're playing. And at some point, you're in the press briefing room, and half the basement where I used to work would get up and go to a meeting that you weren't invited to, a private briefing. It's
Private briefing.
Oh yeah, private briefing. And they would no one would talk about it. They would, half the liberal reporters in the room would just get up. And I covered President Obama and Biden. So they just get up and leave, and what was happening. You weren't invited to the big private press briefing. So it's all about doling out access.
Is that when we hear it's all of a sudden sometimes an event happens, and then if you listen to different outlets, you hear the same sentences like he's weird. Um, is that where that is generated from? The private sessions? This is what we want you to say. Go out and do our work for us.
Well, I think there's talking points that are distributed to Democratic, what they call surrogates, people that are speaking for them, former
Wow.
campaign staff, Gavin Newsom, lots of different surrogates out there for the president. But then the media starts honing in on those talking points, and they do get distributed to their friendly media as well. So yes, we all get this. Our inbox are full of spin, from both sides.
Yep. Sure.
We're constantly getting the talking points from both sides. So you decide if you want to be a mouthpiece or not. You decide if that's your role, or if you just, want to take more of a even-handed stand and just let somebody else say that, and you interview them and you get both sides of the story. But both sides is harder and harder to come by.
That leads me, well, you just kind of opened the door here. It's harder to come by. Why?
Because of this, I would say the access and opinionated journalists get more attention. And so the old school, so I've been in the business for 30 years. So old school reporters, you go on Twitter and you're not unless you have a good story like the Secret Service, where you're breaking exclusives, people are being more opinionated on Twitter, and they're getting followers, and they're building up, they're becoming what they call an influencer. And so to drive that traffic, it's a motivation to become more opinionated, which is not what I think a lot of Americans are looking for. They're looking for, who can I trust in this environment?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not reporting the news. And so a question that we came up with, which is maybe the most important question that I'm going to ask you, is what is the impact of aspirational journalism, where they are injecting their opinion versus just reporting the facts?
What is the impact of that?
The impact on the country, on your profession of journalism. When somebody injects their opinion or how they want you to see something versus just reporting the facts. How's that impacted journalism and our country?
I think it's eroded trust in the media, and I think that people don't read as much anymore. I think there's there's a lot of causes for that. The internet itself, you don't get the physical paper dropped off at your doorstep anymore. There's the ad revenue system is based on clicks rather than based on classified advertising. Yeah. So the more clicks, the more sensational the news is, the more clicks you're going to get. So the more opinion you inject in there, but it's eroding trust in journalism. I'm sure you've seen, I think journalists are probably less trusted than even some members of Congress that have terrible ratings. So it is destructive to our profession, but I don't see it turning back anytime soon, because the financial models are embedded in that system, the news system.
Well, Susan, thank you for joining us today on The Rebound.
It's my pleasure.
Leadership is a learned behavior. We all lead in some way, shape, or form. We all deal with adversity. And when you do, I challenge you to rebound. I challenge you to learn and grow. If you'd like to contact me, you can reach me at dohertycoaching.com. That's DOHERTY coaching.com. Thanks for tuning in.